All right. All right, you guys. Very good afternoon, everyone. How are you guys doing? Cool. Perfect. All right. My name is KRUPIᱧSKI. I'm from Poland, and I work as a front-end tech lead at a company named Flyer. And what my team is doing there is basically building the design system and components library for entire organization. And since by doing this, we are obviously working like a lot with designers. What I wanted to talk about today is basically how to make the most out of this relationship, especially when building components libraries. All right. Can anybody tell me what this is? Button? Well, technically, it's a screenshot of a button, but fair enough, yeah. All right, so it's a button. In more general, this is a reusable core component. And when building things like this, if you want to build them well, lots of different factors need to be taken into consideration. This list isn't exhaustive. This is just the top of my head. There's much, much more. And while some of these items really fall only under engineers' responsibility, some of them only under designers, the thing is that when that the best components are being built when actually these are worked together, collectively, together with designers, which is a challenge because obviously, like, designers do their job and engineers do their job, and yeah. All right, well, let me give you a quick example. Two components, each of them is allowing a user to select one of the items from the list. Now, if I were to implement it, one of the first things I would do would be probably spotting that this and this is most likely the same thing. So I would abstract this, create a list box component, and then reuse it across both of these inputs. Now, if my designer didn't know what I did here, and he wouldn't know because, like, why shall I share the implementation detail with the designer, right? So if he didn't know, odds are that in a month he would come to me and he would say, hey, PRZEMEK, surprise. Like, I want you to change the look of the list, but only for the suggest component. And that's when I would be in a pickle because, I would need to start explaining myself, telling him, I've just reused this, it was better, cheaper, blah, blah, blah. He would probably go more towards the drama tone, like, oh my God, what have you done? Oh my God, my life is now a mess, and so on. Like, yeah, we surely would not want to end up in such a position. So on the flip side, if he knew, two things would happen. First of all, he would not come with this request to me in the first place, because he would understand the trade-off and the limitation of reusing that component, right? So that would be completely clear to him. It has to stay the same across all the inputs of this family. And second thing is that if he wanted to add the third component to this library, he would build this already with the system in mind, meaning that the Jira ticket he would create for the engineer to build the multi-select would go like this. And the last line, it would be the only singular acceptance criteria in this ticket. And it would be his explicit decision, all right? So, okay, we have the list box, go ahead, reuse this. This is exactly what we need here. And does it speed the implementation? Of course, because when you start implementing the multi-select, half of the component is already there. And that's the joint decision of the entire team. So, the more situations like this happened, the more we started realizing, okay, we actually as a design system team need to start changing the mindset from the design first, which I think is sort of the default one in most of the cases, where you first basically design the pixels, right, like the flat UIs, and it's only then when you start thinking how to break it down into components, to design system first, where components are being considered components from the earliest stages of creation, and absolutely everybody in the team is involved in that. But, it was easy to say this. It was a bit more complex to actually implement it. So I was thinking about it, and the natural first step we could have taken was, hey, we should actually get involved earlier in the whole process. And so we did. So we started actually doing the design reviews together with the designers. We're also like pairing with them, working with them as they were like creating stuff. And obviously at the very beginning, they were like, guys, come on, this is design, like, go away, we don't want you here and stuff. But, but then there were like many situations like this, for example. So they wanted to introduce the clearable functionality to the data input, and they needed this ASAP. And we're like, sure, we can do this, but like you should be just aware that this is going to break the API, which means it's going to qualify for the major release, which means it's not going to happen for another month, period, right? And I don't blame them. They had every right not to know and understand when the API breaks and when not. But that's why the engineer's input was so vital at this stage, because they simply knew what to do next with this. And the other takeaway from this great cooperation was that we basically got it to the point where our Jira tickets at the beginning of the sprint were actually ready to be worked on. So we forgot about the situations when your sprint starts, people start opening ticket, and then it turns out that we actually need to turn everything upside down because this isn't doable, and so on, and so on, and so on. So the more we cooperated together, the more we worked together, the more I started realizing that there is some sort of the language barrier there. And for example, in one of the meetings, we actually got stuck in a situation that went like, okay, why do you guys want to introduce the leading visual in the component since we already have the prefix in this component? And we actually were battling for this. And it was only 27 minutes later when we realized, all right, we're actually talking about the exact same thing. And the same happened for input and control, and model and dialogue, and dozens of different situations, right? So the decision we've made was like, okay, we need to build a joint vocabulary and joint dictionary that we will all use together. And after some time, it was actually very palpable in the team that, you know, our conversations about stuff, they started moving quicker, very smoother, and we're getting to the consensus much, much faster. So if it ever happens to you that, you know, your conversation with designers starts to feel like you're running in circles or whatever, like stop for a second and just make sure that you guys actually understand each other because, yeah, you might be not talking about the same thing. And speaking of shared things, there was one more thing that we've introduced, and these were the design tokens. Anybody, by the way, using design tokens in their projects? Couple of people, yet the rest of you guys don't know what you're missing. It's a really wonderful thing. So for those of you who don't know, design tokens are basically, well, that's the bridge between Figma and the code. So these are some abstracted design values like colors, spacings, font sizes, and basically everything that you can use in CSS. And then you can use them directly as variables in the code. And the beauty of this is that these are exact same variables that designers use in Figma. So the odds of, you know, implementing something that would look differently than in Figma are like extremely, extremely low. And if this happens, that sometimes, you know, there is some discrepancy, then you can always try like, hey guys, maybe like your tokens indeed are broken. It's maybe not really us. And the best thing about it is like even better is that this is completely owned by designers. So you as engineer, you do only one thing. You consume the token and use it. And that's it that you do. So yeah, basically, after introducing that, everybody were happy because designers got the sense of, you know, control over how things looked, and we were happy because we said goodbye to all the hex values and all the pixel values and all stuff like that. So that was absolutely great. I was then thinking, okay, how can we get this collaboration even closer? How we can collaborate even better? And then we came up with the idea of basically introducing the designers to the repository. Obviously not to code, no, but there are like many different things that they were able to do that. So for example, the design tokens that I just brought up, like they were the ones who were bringing this into the repository, right? They are exporting from Figma, they are creating PR, they are emerging. And they are doing all of that. And the beauty of the solution is that if, for example, they ever wanted to change the color of the button from blue to light blue, my only interaction with this problem was this 15 seconds when I was approving this PR and reviewing that, right? Like, now is it awesome or is it awesome? That was like, I think it's actually awesome. And same with documentation. So, you know, with the modern and current web interface of GitHub, they were able to edit documentation there as well. You know, because we were hosting the documentation Storybook for consumers, they knew the MDX. So, you know, instead of creating tickets and just chasing us and saying like, hey, can you please just change this? They were going directly to a specific file. They were editing, they were hitting save, they were creating the branch, opening the PR, bam. And there was another thing that, you know, like we were able to take off our shoulders as engineers, and that was super helpful. And with visual regression tests added to the PR, they're also the ones who were approving the PR, obviously not code-wise, but they're the ones trying to assess whether, you know, a specific pixel added or removed is actually something that qualifies for the regression, or whether it's something that is actually desired. So that was like very helpful thing as well for us. In one of the companies I used to work for, like we had this case once when our designer, basically he wanted us to build a button to tweak it. So if you click the chevron, like the menu was supposed to open, and if you click anywhere else on the button, basically the typical on-click was supposed to happen, right? Yeah, we would not really want to have this. So the engineer who was working on this, he came up with a bunch of ideas on how to overcome this. Obviously, all of them were just, some shaky workarounds that we did not really want to get into the code. And he approached me and he said, okay, Przemek, so like, what do we do? How we eventually go about it? And I thought like, all right, so, like either we blindly follow this requirement or we go to the designer and we tell him that this isn't happening. And he looked at me horrified and he was like, what do you mean? Like, we cannot say no to the designer. And I was like, all right, hold my coffee. Like, well, actually we can. Actually, we should say no sometimes. That's our job as engineers, right? If you feel that something is going to be harmful for the code base, it's your job to speak up. The thing is that you just need to do that right. Because obviously you cannot go to the designer and you cannot say like, hey man, this idea stinks, we are not doing this piece. Well, like never ever do that to anyone, although I've seen this happening in the real life. But what you could do would be going to them and saying, all right, hi, so I've read the requirements, I know what you want to achieve, I understand why. The thing is that because of some technical limitations in implementations, which are this and this and this and that, back it up with whatever you want, like we would not really be willing to go down this path, right? And this is going to bite us back in the future. So we have a couple of alternatives in mind, and our question is simply if you would be open to discuss them. And this sets completely different tone for conversation, right? And that's exactly what we did. So we started talking alternatives, and we ended up at building the button group component, which was able to aggregate any number of buttons. And everybody were happy. He was happy, we were happy, and the code was happy as well. Yeah, so my message here is very simple. Don't ever hesitate to push back if you feel you should. Do it, just remember to do it right. If it's done respectfully, it doesn't stop the conversation, it actually starts a better conversation. And the last thing I want to touch on today, that's actually funny because this is something that isn't technical at all. And yet I find it like one of the most critical and most important factors when it comes to building relationships at work that is supposed to collaborate effectively and efficiently. And that thing is trust. And sure, like we all know, trust is important, Przemek, of course, absolutely. My question here is, however, if we all actively and consciously exercise building that trust in our teams. Because, the thing with trust is that it doesn't just fall down from the ceiling. We need to work on this, we need to build this, and this is the responsibility of every single one of us. And if there's no trust in the team, every what for, every why, every really, it feels more like the accusation rather than invitation to the conversation. If there is no trust, people start second guessing. If there is no trust, people start actually fighting for them being right rather than fighting for the actual solution for the problem. That's why it's so important. And, so like what I was doing in my team among many, many different things, so it was like always listening actively for as long as it was required to. I was asking right questions just to make sure that I really understand whatever the person is trying to tell me. And when I was asked questions, I was always responding, fully informatively and also very patiently. That's the most important adjective here, right? So, also being open to other point of views and being transparent with what I do. So I understand that engineering is the essence of what I do, but I just want you to remember that we barely ever work on our own. We barely ever work alone, right? We usually work with people. And the more we invest in the trust, which is super important thing, the better this collaboration will be, whether it's engineers and designers or any other sort of relationship. So, guys, this is what I'm leaving you with after this talk. I wanted to say you were absolutely awesome today. Thank you so much, and I'll just see you around.